Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome the Vice President of Construction for Zurich, North America, John Watrous.
Good morning, all. Zurich is very, very proud and honored to be sponsoring this session this morning. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce General Michael Hayden, the former director of the CIA and the former director of the National Security Agency. As the director of the country's Keystone Intelligence Gathering Agency, he was on the front line of geopolitics and the war on terror at a time when communication was revolutionized. During his tenure at the NSA, the longest in the agency's history, he worked to put a human face on the famously secretive agency. Hayden was also the principal deputy director of the National Intelligence, the highest-ranking military intelligence officer in the country. There, he oversaw the entire intelligence community, including the CIA and NSA. During his nearly 40-year career in the U.S. Air Force, General Hayden served as the commander of the Air Intelligence Agency and director of the Joint Chief of Command Warfare Center. He has also served in senior staff positions at the Pentagon and the U.S. European Command and the National Security Council. Currently, General Hayden is a principal at the Chertoff Group and a distinguished visiting professor at George Mason's University School of Public Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming General Michael Hayden.
Well, good morning, and thanks for the opportunity to come and visit with you, and thank you so much for the need to get out of Washington a day early to make sure my flight would not be canceled and I couldn't make the engagement. So, and my wife thanks you too. But when I talked to the organizers, they asked me to kind of focus on cyber stuff, and I'm going to go do that. But they also suggested my putting it into a broader context. So if you permit me, what I'm going to do here is kind of look like a picture taking a very long wind-up, an awful lot of pumping here before I let the ball go. When I let the ball go, it'll be cyber. But the wind-up is going to kind of touch on some of the other things that we could be fretting about. Now, I've been out of government 4 years now, and very often groups like yours will come and say, would you come and talk with us as a former director of CIA? I said, sure. What would you like me to talk about? And standard answer I get is, what kind of things keep you awake at night? And I have to remind them, I'm out of government. The offensive line of my Pittsburgh Steelers keeps me awake most nights. But if I were in government, okay, I'll give you a list. And I have to share with you, I've had a list for 4 years. There have been 5 things on the list. The list hasn't changed. And I don't think it's because I'm lazy. Okay? I actually think it's because there are 5 things out there that could go bump in the night, and they've remained fairly constant. I usually begin the chat by saying Iran. And here, I'm talking about Iran and nuclear weapons. And I'm sure, even with your busy lives, you've followed the plot line here that the Iranians seem to be on a trajectory that will get them very close to the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. Right? I would suggest to you that when I was director of CIA, Iran was the second most discussed topic in the Oval Office. That's between me and President Bush and Vice President Cheney. Terrorism was number 1. Iran was number 2, and this really drives a point home. There were no consistent number 3s. Okay? Terrorism, Iran, other stuff. I had a good relationship with President Bush. He maybe raised his voice at me twice in 3 years. But I remember one time we had just done an Iran thing in the Oval, and if you get the layout of the Oval, you got a desk here, a couch here, then the 2 easy chairs back here, president and vice president, and you're on the couch, your door is over there, his desk is over there. And so we had this prickly session on Iran, the president suggesting he wasn't pleased with what we were able to tell him. And of course, my intention, he said, all right, that's enough for today, was to get to that door there. But of course, I couldn't go through the president, so I had to do the Great Circle route, which of course, if you've been following along closely, is the route the president would then take to his desk. And he turned to me and he said, Mike, and he started poking his finger at my chest, I don't want to be faced, I don't want any president ever to be faced with only two choices when it comes to this thing. That's Iran and nuclear weapons. And I mean, the two choices are, you're going to have to go do something really nasty in the Middle East, or you're going to let these guys have a weapon. That's where we left it. The sad part is, that's where it still is. And I'm not very, by the way, I understand you had a very inspirational speaker yesterday morning. Okay, I'm going to fix that. Okay. The second thing on my list of 5 is China. And to audiences like you, I just immediately blurt out, and I apologize for mentioning China in the same breath as Iran. China is not an enemy of the United States. There are no good reasons for China to become an enemy of the United States. There are logical, non-heroic policy choices for us and the Chinese that keep this relationship competitive, you know that, occasionally confrontational, never has to get to the level of conflict. But China's on that list of 5, not because China's good or China's bad. China's on that list of 5 because China is. I mean, we are in the process of accommodating in the international system a powerful new nation state. And those people who have studied this in history, this is more history than intelligence, those who study this in history say those are always very, very tough circumstances. The 20th century, remember the last one? The 20th century, okay, is largely defined by the international system incorporating the rise of the German nation state. That didn't go so well. And so you see the dynamic here. Now, by the way, I mean, most of us, particularly people with my background, talk about China. It's there going, you know, it's kind of got that straight line and things are going in that direction and we got a juggernaut and we owe them all our money and you know, there's truth to that. But let me share with you the other side. I am as concerned with Chinese failure as I am with Chinese success. I stay awake more about Chinese weakness than I do Chinese strength. If you think you and I have problems, think of the Chinese and their demography. Think of the Chinese population. With 4 generations of a one-child policy now, that demographic pyramid is starting to look like that. The ecological destruction in China is just beyond belief. The unequal distribution of wealth between the coast and the mainland, or the inland, is dramatic. And the Chinese Communist Party knows this. And by the way, why am I talking about the Chinese Communist Party running China? It has nothing to do with Marx, nothing to do with Engels, Lenin, Mao. It has nothing to do with Mao Zedong. It has nothing to do with ideology. What it has to do with is my left arm representing the growth of Chinese gross domestic product over the past 15 years. And any economist who looks at China knows this thing has to nose over. So then what legitimates the current ruling class? Their inherent morality? If any of you have been reading what's been going on in China with the Bo Xilai affair, no. And then I fear, if you can't do it out of Marx, and they can't, if you can't do it out of unstoppable economic success, if you can't do it out of some Confucian sense of worthiness, the only thing you got left is nationalism, which is not a good mix. in terms of a rising power. So, Iran, China. I usually take most North American audiences by surprise with the next one. I say Mexico. And here, we're just talking about large swaths of the Mexican state being beyond the control of the Mexican government. Okay? It has the feel, technically it's not, all right, but it has the feel of an insurgency. We actually had this argument when I was in government. President Calderon, who has just left the presidency down there, he was elected in 2006. And by 2007, okay, this is Bush 2, right, he's coming to the United States to ask for robust cooperation against the drug cartels. I mean, this is an unnatural act for a Mexican president. I mean, I'll just be short and euphemistic. We and the Mexicans carry a burden of history, you know. Any of you watching the HD channel last night on the networks inside the hotel, they played the classic Alamo twice because yesterday was the anniversary of the fall of the Alamo. So you get the burden of history thing here, right? So now we've got a Mexican president coming to an American president saying, we have a problem. We should cooperate on it. I can still remember the NSC meetings when this was going on. You know, we're kind of lined up here, the intel guys, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Secretary of Defense. You go over there, Secretary of State, Attorney General, a few other folks. So we get just kind of dropped on the table, and I'm obviously oversimplifying here, but you get this thing kind of dropped on the table, and you kind of go, let me get this right. Latin American country, losing control, instability, wide swaths without government presence, fueled by the drug trade. Ooh, wait, I know about this one. It's called Colombia. And, I mean, we've actually been very successful in Colombia. Right? So, I mean, our instinct over here on this side of the table, the group that I'd call the power ministries, I mean, their instinct is, hey, give me that Plan Colombia thing. Hey, here's what we ought to do. And immediately, the guys on the other side of the table, not so fast, big guy. Colombia is an insurgency. It's being conducted by the FARC. The goal of Colombia is to overthrow the government in Colombia. Yeah, they're paying for it with drug trade, but it is a political movement for political goals. That is not the circumstance in Mexico. It's the drug trade. They're doing it for the money. Now, they're doing it so well and so expansively that it actually is threatening the stability of the Mexican government. But the root is criminal. Well, in our government, if you define the root over here as political, you got a bunch of people in our government with three-letter in their name that kind of click in. DOD, JCS, CIA. If, on the other hand, you say it's criminal, you got other three-letter guys click in. FBI, DEA, CBP, ICE. And we kind of defined the Mexican problem back in 07, 08 over here. All that said, if you watch this carefully, what we have actually done looks a lot more like what we do in Kandahar, Afghanistan, than what it is you watch on TV when you're looking at CSI Miami. Our response has taken on a very powerful militarized flavor. So that's the third. So what have I done? Iran, China, Mexico. The fourth is terrorism. And here I am going to sound a bit like your speaker yesterday. I can put a semi-happy face on the American war against terror. The ability of those people out there who still have an ability to cause you harm, the ability of them to do what it is they really want to do. That large-scale, massive, complex attack against an iconic target that causes mass casualties. World Trade Center 1, World Trade Center 2, the Bojinka plot over the Pacific, multiple airliners simultaneously, the liquid bombing plot over the Atlantic in 2006, the reason you can't bring your aftershave through the checkpoint anymore because of the hydrogen peroxide they were going to use. The ability of those guys to do those things, I'm an intel guy, I can't say never, okay? But they will find it very, very hard to mount those kinds of attacks. Why? Why are they laid so low? Why is their capacity so much less than it used to be? Because of the incredible continuity between two amazingly different presidents of the United States. It is hard to imagine two human beings being more different in personality than our 43rd and our 44th presidents. But when it comes to waging this war, much to the surprise of the rest of the planet, these guys are very, very similar. And if that intrigues you, I got a whole bunch of stuff on that one. So that's the fourth. And my fifth is cyber, okay? But let me hold cyber out of that list of five. If you take that list of five, I've got 2 nation states, Iran and China, and 3 things, cyber, terrorism, and Mexico, Mexico being transnational crime. I mean, our problem is not with Mexico. Our problem is in Mexico. That's a really different spread for someone to come up here and talk to you about national security. Brent Scowcroft, who used to be a boss of mine, wrote an article a while back. And here's how Brent put it. Now, this is, I think, really important. He said when he did his thing, and he did his thing for 2 presidents. He was twice national security advisor. He said, all the big pieces on the board I cared about were nation states. And the way I slapped those pieces around to move them was what you and I would call hard power. Okay? And Brent now points out that neither of those sentences are as true as they used to be. There are important pieces on the board, the National Security Board, that aren't nation states. And very often hard power, you know, that mass of men and metal, very often hard power is insufficient to get them to move. And so Brent's saying it's quite a different world. And do you know what he attributes this new world to? The phenomenon you and I call globalization. We are now so interconnected, okay, that the ability of the nation state to either threaten you or protect you has been much reduced. Look, Brent makes this point. He says that in the age of industrialism, okay, that's our 20th century, okay, in the age of industrialism, most external trends pushed in the direction of a stronger nation state. I, for one, am old enough to remember when making a phone call, right? When making a phone call was so complicated and so hard to do, it could only be done by a state institution or a state-governed monopoly. Remember? Everything seemed to flow in the direction to make the nation state stronger. Now, since I've held up my iPhone, and all of you have one of these or a BlackBerry, okay, the last thing we want is the state to get involved in this. It goes too fast. It's too much fun. It's too easy. It's too efficient. Government, I don't think so. Okay? Well, that's a trend writ broadly. Okay? In essence, what's happened in the world is we're living off globalization. We're living off interconnectedness. And it's the globalization and the interconnectedness that is now creating new vectors of threat. I am also old enough to remember when a religious fanatic in a cave in the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan was not something I worried about. But in today's interconnected world, I have every reason to be concerned about that actor. This is probably most easily explained, most obvious in the world I just described for you. You and I sometimes don't appreciate enough how big a deal this is. I went out to Las Vegas about 3 summers ago. I was talking to an organization called Black Hat. Okay? 3,000 semi-reformed hackers in the ballroom of Caesar's Palace. Okay. And I said to them, do you know how big a deal this is? They go, yeah, we know, we're hackers. I said, no, you don't. I want you to think, because I'm a liberal arts major, I'm not a technologist, so my mind works in another lane. I said, I want you to think back to the last time something like this really stirred things up. And long pause. It was kind of a rhetorical question, so I answered it for him. I think this is the most disruptive thing to happen to human civilization since European man discovered the Western Hemisphere. Now think back about what changed in that explosion of European imperialism in the 15th, 16th, and 17th century. It changed everything. It changed what you ate, it changed your view of self, changed your view of humanity, changed the diseases you contracted, changed the form of government. I won't do this because I want to leave time for questions. But I can crank this metaphor about European discovery in this 2 or 3 more times. In the age of discovery, we had, it's going to be hard to believe, I know, for this audience. But you know what? We actually had companies in the age of discovery that acted like they were nation states. You know, people like the East India Tea Company and people like the Hudson Bay Company. And now, in this era, Microsoft, Google. I mean, you actually have companies that are so powerful in this new domain that they act like nation states in it. By the way, after I got all done, you know, it's like the European discovery of the Western Hemisphere, I got all done with my presentation. I'm walking out of the ballroom at Caesar's Palace. This older gentleman comes up to me and says, not bad for a speech, Hayden. Well, thank you, sir, but you're short of more than a brick short of a load. What do you mean? He said, it's not like the European discovery of the Western Hemisphere. Oh, okay. What's it like? He says it's like the human development of language. He actually said that. I said, okay, think about it, you know, think out loud for me. What he said was, your example is good enough for the external world. This thing, and by the way, I mean, this could be an iPad, it could be your computer, it could be your online banking, all right? This phenomenon is not just changing our external world. It's changing our internal world. It is changing how we think. It is changing human cognition. And I did a little research after that and came across some books that actually point out that human thinking and how societies are organized can be traced to the tools being used at the time. And so we have not yet seen the full implications of this. I've got 5 grandkids. The last one was born about a year ago. She's 1 year old now. She's got a little brother, just turned 3. When she was getting born, my wife and I took the little brother, who was about 15, 16 months old at the time. We took him from our son and daughter-in-law. We had him all, the family went to the hospital for the birth of the new baby. We were at a restaurant. My phone kind of went zzz. I looked, and our son had sent us a picture of our daughter-in-law and our new granddaughter. Lovely little picture. And I showed it to my wife. She kind of tears up, okay? And I show it to Alex, the 15, 16, 17-month-old. He looks at it. Okay, I got to look this way. He looks at it and goes, "15, 16, I mean, you see what I mean about change. We don't appreciate how big a deal it is. I should also suggest to you that this thing here is an incredibly American deal. This one really was made in the USA. If we're coming out here in 500 years, all right, and you've got someone out here making this kind of presentation, and someone says, you know, the United States of America, a lot of people are going to go, United States, United States, United States, United States, United States. Oh, yeah. The internet guys. This may be the thing by which our civilization is remembered, because this was actually built here. Now, you know who built it, right? Okay, a little snicker from the Dems, guffaws from the Republicans, okay. Actually, it was built by Vint Cerf, and it wasn't built too far from here. It was built in Palo Alto, California at Stanford University. Vint now lives in Falls Church. He's a neighbor. Vint comes over to my class. He says, yeah, we were working away to put that thing together. I mean, it came from ARPANET, the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Department of Defense. The goal of ARPANET was to connect the labs in a few universities so that they could move a lot of information quickly and easily between and among the labs and the universities. Let me repeat. The goal of ARPANET was, how do I build a system that allows me to easily and efficiently move large volumes of data between and among a limited number of nodes, all of whom I know and all of whom I trust? Now, here's a scary sentence. That remains the architecture and the technology of this. It is based on absolute implicit trust. Defense is at best an afterthought. That engineering principle that I told you Vint Cerf used is the one that energizes today's World Wide Web, which is populated by an infinite number of nodes, most of whom I don't know, and a bunch of whom do not deserve my trust. That's the issue out there. That's why we have so many problems in this new domain. Let me talk for a few minutes about the problems, okay, and then I'll end up, and as I promised, leave some time for questions. I generally characterize cyber sins and cyber sinners. Okay? Now, you need to keep in mind, I'm speeding a bit here, you need to keep in mind that this is all because the domain, the cyber world, was built in a certain way, and that way isn't a way that makes it particularly easy to defend. It's a way that makes it particularly easy to use. And so you and I, because of this great temptation of convenience, have taken things that we used to keep in our desk, or sometimes even keep in our safe, and decided that we're going to put them out there in this domain. And so you have an inherent vulnerability. We are sloppy with our language, though, when we discuss the inherent vulnerability. Anything unpleasant happens to me on this phone, anything happens unpleasant to you on that BlackBerry in the next couple of minutes, you're going to say you suffered a cyber attack. Okay? We don't say it that way inside our government. We actually have a fairly precise taxonomy. And I'm sorry to pull you through a Washington, D.C. taxonomy here, but it's important that we get the language right. One of the things we say happens in the cyber domain is when we do it, we call it CNE. C, computer, N, network, E, exploitation. Computer network exploitation. In other words, what someone is doing is getting into your data uninvited because you decided to put your stuff out there in the cloud. Someone is getting into your data uninvited, and they're simply stealing it. Now, the greatest offender out there right now is China, right? Bar none. There was a report published about 2 weeks ago by the Mandiant Corporation, run by a young fellow named Kevin Mandia, whom I know very well. It was a stunning report. Some of you, I'm sure you saw some coverage of it on the evening news. They necked back some Chinese cyber activity back to a specific building in Shanghai, in a particular unit of the People's Liberation Army. We at the Chertoff Group got a bunch of phone calls on the Mandiant thing. And I remember one reporter saying, "Whoa, man, this is big news." And I recall responding, "Well, it's big, but it's not news. This has been going on. This is perhaps new to you. It is not new." I'm a professional intelligence officer. Let me give you my grade. I have never seen anything like the Chinese cyber espionage effort against the United States of America. I stand in awe at the breadth, depth, persistence, and sophistication of Chinese espionage against us. And what makes it even more interesting and perhaps more dangerous is that they're not fundamentally coming after me, the government guy. They're coming after you, the business people. In essence, we have a nation state coming to steal industrial trade secrets, industrial property, intellectual property, negotiating positions that our businesses have in the private sector. Hey, look, let me be the first to admit, we steal stuff too. Okay? In fact, we're better at it than anyone else. We're number one. But we self-limit. Your cyber theft people, also known as the National Security Agency, steal secrets out there to keep you safe and to keep you free. They do not steal secrets to make you rich. They do not steal secrets for commercial advantage. And what the Chinese are doing is stealing for commercial advantage. And if that's all that was going on out there, it would be really bad. But that's not all that's going on out there. In addition to going somewhere where you're not invited and busting into your network to learn about your information, some other folks have decided to go where they're not invited and to create some harm, to harm your network. When we do that, we don't call it computer network exploitation. We call it computer network attack. And so we come after your computer system, not just to read your mail. We want to do something to your mail or something to your computer. So we throw in one of those nasty D words: deny, delay, degrade, disrupt, destroy your information. This has happened too. September 2007, the government of Estonia wants to tear down a monument to the Red Army in downtown Tallinn and move it to the outskirts of town where there's a Red Army graveyard. They go ahead with the plan. When they do it, you have to look up here, patriotic Russian hackers conduct severe distributed denial of service attacks against the Estonian internet system. A DDoS attack is you just ping servers with so many hits that the server says, I quit. And thereby you lose service. So the Estonians lost internet service. A year later, with 2 Russian divisions heading towards Skin Valley in Georgia, this is August of 2008, these same patriotic Russian hackers conduct DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks, against the Georgian internet system, which the Georgians were using for command and control, and they collapse the Georgian internet system. So a cyber movement to create cyber destruction. We call that computer network attack. I'll call it computer network attack sub 1 because you now know I'm going to tell you about computer network attack sub 2. Computer network attack sub 1, I go to a network, I occupy it, and I make the network bad. I break it. Computer network attack sub 3, I go to a network and I use the network, not to destroy it, but I use that network to create destruction somewhere else. The poster child for this is something called Stuxnet. If I say Stuxnet, does that ring a bell? This is a computer worm that was launched several years ago. Somehow or another, it got into the Iranian nuclear complex at Natanz, took over the control system, sold to them by Siemens, took over the Siemens control system, sent commands to a bank of centrifuges, which is about 1,000, to have them spin at self-destructive speeds while still reflecting to the operators everything was normal. You know, nothing to see here, folks, keep moving. And 1,000 centrifuges destroyed themselves at Natanz. Now look, remember I told you the first problem I had was Iran, an Iranian nuclear weapon, and George Bush poking his finger at me? So I have to tell you, somebody destroying 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz to me is an absolute unalloyed good. But let me rephrase what I've just said to you. Someone, almost certainly a nation state, because this was too complicated to be done by some socially retarded 19-year-old from his mom's basement. Okay. Someone, almost certainly a nation state, has just used a cyber weapon in a time of peace, claiming it was a legitimate act of, and you tell me, self-defense, counterproliferation, I don't know, used a cyber weapon in time of peace to destroy what another nation could only describe as their critical infrastructure. That's different. I actually said on 60 Minutes, somebody's crossed the Rubicon. We got a legion on a different side of the river now. And I carefully say that this is no way comparable to the destructive power then, but this smells, says a little bit of the odor of August 1945, because someone has just used an entirely new class of weapons. Now, if I went on like this for just a few minutes longer, I could make all of you afraid of this. Okay? And I could wave my arms for just a few more minutes after that, and most of you would say, let me get this right. I'm out there, I'm doing business, and I'm vulnerable to all this stuff. Where the heck is my government? God almighty, this is a zone of conflict. This is my gateway to a zone of high-end conflict. Where the hell is my government out there defending me? And you would be right, because the government's not there very much. And then I would get done. We'd do a couple Q&A. You'd give me polite applause, I hope. Okay. And then you would really reach into your coat pocket, and you'd pull it out, and you'd do that. And you'd check your emails. And that which was a zone of conflict during my talk 15 minutes ago, now is a zone of your personal communication. And when I had your heart and mind over here, you're saying, where the hell is my government? And now when your heart and mind is over here in the zone of your personal communication, you're saying, government? Oh, no. I don't want, do you see the issue? Do you see the problem? You and I have not yet told our government what it is we want them to do or what it is we will let them do to defend us in this new space. Now, there are other spaces. If we had more time, I'd have taken you through this whole doctrinal thing of land, sea, air, space, cyber. Okay? And up here, it's new, it's different, it's man-made, it's dangerous, and we're not sure what we want the government to do or what we'll let the government do. Down here, land, sea, air, and space, we still have those issues. Hey, trust me. As the director of the CIA and the director of NSA, I can tell you, we still got some serious issues down here about what it is you want the government to do or what it is you will let the government do. And if you're interested in those, I can take my shirt off and show you the scars. Okay? But by and large, we've kind of worked it out. By and large, we've got generalized rules here. Let me end with a story, and then there will be time for questions. I'm here with a backpack, all right? I always travel with a backpack. I don't like the briefcase thing. I've been wearing backpacks since I've been in the military. So let's say I go up to the room and we're done. I got a 1 o'clock flight out of here. I go out there, and I'm out there in front of the lobby, and there's something going on, and a policeman, okay, a policeman from Palm Desert comes up and says, open the bag. Harkening back to my knowledge of American history, what my parents told me, and American political and cultural values, I actually think I will, but I certainly hope I would look the officer from Palm Desert Police Department in the eye and utter a 2-word, monosyllabic Old English phrase that roughly translates to, I think not. But if that didn't happen, and I got in the car, and they drove me to the airport in Palm Springs, and I'm at the TSA checkpoint, and the young TSA kid behind the machine says, sir, open your bag. What do? You open your bag. You see that? You see what I'm saying? We got it worked out. Pretty much. We got bupkis up here. Okay? We do not have the rules of the road yet. And what you see going on in Washington when you have debates in Congress or presidential executive orders and so on is a reflection of you all have not yet decided what you want your government rules to be up here. There was a bill in last Congress sponsored by Senators Collins and Lieberman. You cannot think of two more solid center-of-the-road people than Susan Collins and Joe Lieberman. They had this bill in the Senate. This bill was equally opposed by the American Civil Liberties Union and the American Chamber of Commerce. That's like a miracle. But it reflects the fact we don't have the big ideas down. So join in the debate, understand a bit more what's at risk, have a view as to what you might want the government to do. And by the way, if you want the government to be timid and not heavy-handed there, then remember what my dad told me when I came home from a fight when I was 9 years old. Quit whining, act like a man, and defend yourself out there in the cyber domain. And with that, I did promise time for questions. I will